Look, we all need to stop calling this thing a Peter Jackson movie, okay? Guy who directed this, dude named Christian Rivers, never directed a feature film before, so don't just go on Henry Selick him on his first go. I mean, incidentally, if you don't get that reference, then you're probably one of those people who still call it Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas, and yeah, we should talk. But first, Steampunk, the movie. Mortal Engines kicks off long after the world as we know it has been devastated by the 60-minute war, where a bunch of quantum bombs, which are essentially EMPs or electromagnetic weapons, were detonated across the globe, and all the survivors banded together under what's called municipal Darwinism. So the kicker here is the human cities have become giant tanks, effectively, that sort of stalk the lands of what used to be the human world in search of weaker cities that they can sort of harpoon, absorb, and chop up and bolt onto themselves and sort of expand. It's kind of like that Doctor Who episode Starship Britain, to be honest, but with a sort of predatory bent to it. Anyway, into this mix comes an outsider with a mysterious past who's out for revenge on the corrupt mastermind behind the tank city of London. And there's a wide-eyed young historian who inadvertently gets in her way. So he's left for dead by someone he thought was one of the good guys. Turns out she might not have been wrong all along. Our young historian has to team up with this mysterious assassin, find his way back to London, and expose the wannabe dictator for the murderous despot that he really is. Cue the clip. Okay, it's really not often that you have to look at a big-budget tentpole release and think that might actually have worked better as an animated movie with talking mice, but somehow Mortal Engines is actually that movie. And there's something weirdly Don Bluth about the whole thing. From the way it's staged to the way it unfurls its story, it all feels kind of like an 80s animated epic that really should star talking mice, like Fievel Goes Steampunk or something. Anyway, its roots here are a little bit more ordinary than that. You see, Mortal Engines comes to us like a solid half of the rest of our blockbusters these days, by way of a young adult novel. Yeah, another one of those. This one's by Philip Reeve, and before you ask, yes, that means there are sequels to the source material just waiting to be loaded into the chamber. But to be honest, after this, I'd kind of be shocked if we see any more of them greenlit. I mean, Mortal Engines is perfectly fine, but it's never really anything more than that. It's kind of fitting for a movie built around industrial age technology. The story being told here manages to feel so staggeringly dated. I mean, not dated like, cliche. It gets a fair few of those in, though, to be fair. But insofar as it seems to have actually been constructed, it seems to have been constructed as a movie purely for people who don't watch movies and those don't kind of have a functional knowledge of how plot mechanics work. Like, if I gave you a seemingly never-ending series of flashbacks of Hugo Weaving as who's the baddie in this, like palling around with our lead heroine's mom while she's a little girl, what's the assumption there? Now, if you didn't piece a certain reveal together from literally that, and incidentally those same flashbacks are in the trailer on this one, so don't be hating, this might actually blow you away. If you did piece it together, you're not going to hate it, but you're going to feel like you're kind of going through the motions with a lot of this. The cast are all pretty uniformly engaging for what they've got to work with. It's a grandiose dystopian fantasy adventure, so Hugo Weaving's right at home, snarling up like a goddamn trooper, like he always does. Robert Sheehan manages to be the least annoying he's ever been in my eyes, despite what seem to be ongoing efforts by the screenplay here to keep bolstering him as the lead, even though he's clearly not. And Icelandic actress Hera Hilmar, she's making a pretty decent impression in that place. She's Hester, so she gets kind of the lion's share of the story's focus. I like the actress a lot, and I'm going to be really honest, I kind of thought she was Elle Fanning the entire time I was watching this. There's nothing wrong with that, obviously, both very fine actresses, but just be warned, we might have another Javier Bardem, Jeffrey Dean Morgan thing brewing up here. Directorially, Christian Rivers, that guy who isn't Peter Jackson, he does a pretty solid job with the larger-than-life theatrics of it all, even if it does kind of verge on scattershot sometimes. To be fair, there's a lot going on at this, especially in the third act. The third act, swings for everything up to and including Star Wars, and, they're standing for the requisite Skybeam-type MacGuffin, you got Junkie XLs doing the score on this, and if anyone should know kind of how to nicely capitalize on the whole steampunk thing, it's him, right? It doesn't disappoint, you know. I mean, seriously though, what does? It's 2018 and we're only now getting a full-blown steampunk flick? I mean, we've had the BioShock game franchise for like a decade now, right? Just boggles the mind. Anyway, for all the sort of basic fun that Mortal Engines manages to deliver, and it is pretty baseline stuff, like, there's fun, but it's very, very baseline fun. I mean, for all of that, there's just a lot that never comes together with it. I mean, they've got this South Korean pop artist, I think Yahi, they got her to show up as this legendary outlaw named Fang, and, like, she and the film are trying to like play it up and like it's meant to be this big thing, but there's no like grandeur or any kind of real cool factor to be found in the character whatsoever, you know? It's like we're just told, hey, you heard about this awesome lady? And then some lady shows up with like really funky hair and has a couple one-liners and the sort of standard I look out for #1 stock persona, and that's kind of the extent of it. I mean, effort wasted. But, you know, at least the tanks look good. There's just loads and loads of this stuff in there, like entire characters you can't help but think are just dragging the runtime towards this pretty already bloated length. I mean, it's 10 minutes past the 2-hour mark, by the way. And like, all of those characters would have been lopped out by another pass at streamlining the script, you know? I mean, the writing, incidentally, is actually pretty goofy. I mean, for a movie as derivative as Mortal Engines Never Stops Feeling, it's actually kind of surprising that it's both penned and played as being kind of as straight-faced and insistent upon itself as it is, but, you know, at least it knows to stop and have some lantern-jawed fun with an action set piece here and there, so, you know, it's far from an ordeal. Chuck in a few visual nods, or straight rip-offs, depending on who you ask, to things like the ABC robot from the 1995 Sylvester Stallone Judge Dredd movie, or that weird mecha spider thing that John Peters was so obsessed with in the 90s. Remember that? That guy was going to build entire movies around those things. And you got loads of those, but you're unlikely to like walk away from this feeling like cheated or pandered to, or just having had your time wasted. It's mostly just a meh version of a sci-fi adventure movie, you know? It feels like it could have done with the imagination of someone like the Wachowskis behind it, but then you remember Jupiter Ascending exists and you don't get time to remember anything else because you're immediately rushing to shower off that feeling. But yeah, this is way, way better. Just still not a particularly great film in any of its own right. I'm going to be intrigued to see what Christian Rivers directs next, admittedly, because I kind of feel like the weight of the concept on this one gives you a pretty limited range in which you can kind of show off your full directorial toolbox. But then again, like, you do kind of think Ryan Coogler made Black Panther work, and this movie's own producer, note, by the way, I said producer, made the goddamn Lord of the Rings trilogy, so it's not like it's unheard of to make something, you know, this massive in scope into something genuinely great and interesting. Problem is, it's not interesting, though. It's just fine. I mean, I laughed my ass off at like the disclaimer that some children may be temporarily removed from their parents, because like that no doubt sounded a lot more far-fetched like when they were filming this 2 years ago. And well, there were a few of those little kind of, you know, of our time societal barbs and shots like that, and those and a sort of pretty apathetic attitude towards just going with it. You know, for me, those kind of, they're enough to propel this sort of otherwise pretty 2-star movie into a 3, but I appreciate it's a very fine caveat. I will check this out again when it hits home platforms. I didn't hate it, but I just didn't in any way love it either. I mean, just stop Henry Selick, Christian Rivers. I mean, come on, we're better than that. In the world of epically difficult cells, meanwhile, we gotta talk An Elephant Sitting Still, which is amazing, but on paper, you're gonna think I'm nuts. So this is the first and last film of Chinese novelist Hu Bo, who wrote and directed and edited this based on a story from his own novel, Huge Crack, which was published last year. I'm not even going to pretend to have read it. It's a Chinese subtitled slice of life piece, chronicling a day in the lives of a group of people, sort of going about their individual days and dealing with their own issues and storyline, and all whilst tying in sort of thematically to the local zoo where, you guessed it, an elephant is sitting still. It's 10 minutes short of 4 hours in length. No, I am not kidding, and it's absolutely fantastic. I'm not kidding about that either. Thing is, this is Hu Bo's final work because he tragically took his own life shortly after completing this film, and there's some really horrifying reports out there as to why. He'd have been a terrific talent to have out there if this is anything to go by. His style's got a sort of consciousness to it, this way of like drawing you in both visually and by the characters. I mean, I don't mean like through slick imagery or anything like that. It's just really great character writing in here that's then just performed and shot and staged, and just perfect note, perfect precision. You can't help just being lured in by like hook, line, and sinker. I mean, I know the runtime is going to put like most people off. Like that's going to be the big turn off for a lot of people. That's a huge time soak, I admit. But if you've got that time and you want a really powerful, gripping drama that's just about folk, you know, nothing more, nothing less. This one's a hard 4 stars from me, and I can't recommend it highly enough. But 4 hours, I know, right? Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, rate, and review.